A ship has sailed off on the horizon. The man on board has left this woman behind. He seduced her. He used her. He abandoned her. Her name is Ariadne. We see her stretching her arm to the vessel. But then she hears something. She turns her head to see what it could be. It is her delightful rescue, quick at hand. A troop comes from the wood, complete with a happy satyr, a fat drunk, a cymbal player, a miscellaneous reveler, and her future husband, Bacchus himself. Ian Kennedy thinks he leaps smitten by love from his chariot, a leap I do not see. He tried to seize her, but she was further away than he realized. Because he's drunk, he grabbed nothing but air. His momentum now has doomed him to certainly fall flat on his face. Her look shows alarm for him and not for herself, and the expression on his face is one of forlorn embarrassment. Oh shit, she is gonna see me wipe out. You know, Will Rogers met his wife by purposefully crashing his bicycle in front of her. There's just more than one way to go about it. Alfonso d'Este, the Duke of Ferrara, commissioned Titian to paint 3 pictures for his Camerino, which, as David Rosand writes, was turned into one of the most remarkable rooms of the Renaissance. The 3 pictures are the Worship of Venus, the Bacchanal of the Andrians, and Bacchus and Ariadne. In the Worship of Venus, David Rosand writes, the subject is taken from the imagines of the elder Philostratus, rhetorical descriptions of ancient paintings purportedly in a Greek villa outside of Naples. So this commission shows us something about the quest to reclaim the ancient mastery of the arts, and the description of Philostratus is, Cupids are gathering apples. On the ends of the branches, apples, golden and red and yellow, invite the whole swarm of Cupids to harvest them. But the Cupids need no ladders, for aloft they fly, even to where the apples hang. And in looking at the Cupids, we see that they have different colored wings. Most of them are blue, but some of them are red, and in Titian paintings, blue and red can respectively indicate the sacred and the profane, and so the blue cupids perhaps shoot arrows that fill the victim with sacred love, while others with profane. But this one cupid in the foreground has an apple in both hands and seems to have golden wings and may represent the unique balance between the two. But both ideas, the sacred and the profane, are adored here in the Titian. This red-winged Cupid soars to the highest branches to fetch the apples. And on the right we see 2 women. The one in the red profane garb offers up her mirror to Venus, as though she would sacrifice her worldly vanity to the goddess of love. The woman in blue, that sacred blue, has hands clean enough that she may lay one of them on the statue itself. Here's an amusing line from Ian Kennedy regarding the appearance of the Cupids themselves. The putti, whose crisply rendered bodies evoke the shiny surfaces, juicy fragrance, and even crunchiness of the apples they gather. So I guess Ian Kennedy is tempted to bite into these playful little Cupids. And if he did, they do look crunchy. That's the kind of observation that makes an art book worth our time. Ian Kennedy, a little bit of a weirdo. But if we are thinking like that, the sacred nymph looks milky, and the profane nymph looks beefy. And Venus herself certainly does not look edible, but she does look as though she is scanning the group and is perhaps even wary of misbehavior. A playfully nervous babysitter on the hook for these shenanigans, though with no trace of what you might call real concern. You'd never know she was in her role as the goddess of beauty here. Venus looks maternal and watchful. Another Cupid carries something of a burden. He looks like an infant Sisyphus, the Greek king who was forced to carry a rock around. And this Cupid has been shorn of his locks, as though in censure his wings may even have been clipped. I interpret this Cupid to represent that person who takes life too seriously, and because he doesn't want to just play like the other Cupids, he gets a burden to deal with while the others play. And if our first thought is to wonder at the symbolism of the apples, I think we're supposed to joke about that. I think we're supposed to not care what they symbolize. These are some words from the German writer J.J. Bachhofen. And I reserve the right to take this seriously in another video, but for right now, I think this is the sort of thing Titian is actually making fun of. The quote I'm about to read is talking about a different analogy. Instead of apples and arrows, he's comparing eggs and a serpent. But I think he would see the same thing in this Titian. There is an opposition between the primordial feminine matter, here I think he would have meant the apples, and the masculine kinetic principle, the arrows, is expressed in two terms which play a prominent part in the religious law of the ancients. These are the terms sanctum, the untouchable, and sacrum, the consecrated. Okay, so we already don't want to read the rest of this, right? This is what Titian's making fun of. He's taking these objects that have symbolic value and letting children play with them. These little immature cupids are using these objects that would tempt the esoteric inquirer to read too far into them like they are mere toys. And with that, let's turn to the next picture of pleasure, the Bacchanal of the Andrians, set on the island of Andros. We see wine central here. So let's read some lines from Euripides' Bacchae. Yes, these are the lines of Tiresias. The son of Semele, as in Bacchus, found out the grape's rich juice and taught us mortals that which beguiles the miserable of mankind of sorrow. Bacchus gave us the gift of wine to outwit life's miseries. Now let's go figure by figure. Look at this pasty white, potentially red-headed, and probably sunburn doomed girl passed out in the foreground. And consider these additional lines from Euripides. Sleep, too, and drowsy oblivion of care he gives, all healing medicine of our woes. And in observing this girl, we see someone who has no woes. She is totally at peace. Wine in this picture here by Titian is more, however, than merely a lubricant for lifelong suffering. It is also an accomplice of culture. It accompanies the dance here. It necessitates the manufacture of glassware, bronze goblets, basins, pottery, and of course, it encourages music. In fact, these two musicians are more focused on the music than they are on the wine. She refills her glass almost as an afterthought. Her sheet music is in front of her, and she seems to be listening to some artistic suggestion from her friend, something to make the composition better. The wine also fosters connoisseurship. This guy here is the connoisseur. He holds the glass jug of wine up against the sunlight in order to inspect the color. And I know that when I do this, and I almost always drink Burgundy, I'm looking for it to be as purple as possible. And here, this wine actually does have a great color to it. Titian's got great taste. Taken as a whole, there is no warning here about the dangers of excess. It is entirely moderate and fun. The only person who seems not to be enjoying himself is this recurrence of a Sisyphus, the rock bearer, carrying away this jug. We saw a Sisyphus in the Cupids, we see a Sisyphus here, and we actually see a Sisyphus yet again in the Baccus and Ariadne, pulling up the rear on this train. This time it's the real Sisyphus carrying a boulder. His presence is squeezed in at the end, and yet he still is there for the purpose of presenting contrast. He being tragic, everyone else being comic. And when I say everyone else is comic, I'm including Ariadne. That's how I interpret this. She doesn't seem all that broken up about Theseus. Bacchus seems to be in a greater state of agitation than she is. You know, she's almost got a look on her face like, geez, what's this guy's problem? And looking at the overall setting, if you didn't know the backstory of the painting, you would never know that Naxos is an island. There's no sense that she's really being marooned. The landscape extends well into the distance. There's no distant shore. There's signs of civilization. So taking it as a whole, Titian has done all he could to remove the tragic element from this story. He has done exactly what wine is meant to do. Out of this story that has its woeful moment, he has purged it of all misery.